So exactly how do we get a reliable statement, whether it's from a victim, witness, or the suspect? Okay. Welcome to episode 43, The Crime Before the Crime, from First Thought to Final Act. Many years ago, about more than 40 years ago, I did some training and had doing a lot of research in behavioral analysis and criminal behavior. Max about 120 hours in dedicated classroom time and research. And at that time, learned what it was called the cycle of behavior. Okay. Now, you'll see the cycle of behavior right over here to my left. There are 5 elements to the cycle of behavior. Okay. There's distorted thinking, there's planning, there's preparation, there's the event horizon, and the event. Now, if you're looking for what am I after in the interview, no matter what you're in game for, whether it's that witness or that subject, these are the pegs that I want to lock my interview on. This is the data of where it should be going, okay? And each little phase has its own specific thing. Now, if you're talking about Bubba and Earl get drunk and beat the snot out of each other outside the Dewdrop Inn, that's just a couple of drunks, a couple of idiots. That's not what I'm talking about. But distorted thinking, for example, again, about 40 plus years ago, got an opportunity to sit in on a debriefing of a serial killer named Donald Harvey. Donald was killing people inside of hospitals. As a matter of fact, 87 victims that he had. And if we listen to him, you can understand his thought process. He explained why he was doing it in ways he had justified to himself. And that these people were languishing, they were laying around, families didn't take care of them anymore, and that it was better for them to pass on and not to suffer like that. Now, that's what he was saying, but when you listen to him, he was getting off on this, and he would take people to the edge of death 4, 5, 6, 7 times. So distorted thinking is, it's in the mind first. When we think of the idea, the concept of what we're going to do, and we see ourselves doing it and enacting it. Now, this is the same whether it's serial burglaries, whether it's arsons, whether it's hacking, whether it's serial rapists, abuse of children, whether it's armed robbery process, whether it's car theft. It's all the same. Now, each of these inmates we talked to in the prisons all felt at the time they committed their particular act, whatever it was, that had every right to do it, and the law was suspended for their particular situation. So the first thing, it sits in that vault in there, and we work our way through it and overcome the thresholds that would have stopped us from doing it. We see this with school shooters, serial bombers, etc. For example, the Go Geets murderer. You can see the thought processes in his writings building up until he passes that threshold. So once you've got that thought and pass it there, if you progress, then the next step to that is going to be the planning. Now, this is how we think we're going to do it. This is how we think it's going to go. This is how we're going to try to do it. Now, for example, at the Boston Marathon, the different methods and plans they could have had in mind of how to make the attack on a marathon. And they find a settled one. What would work? What do we think would give us the best resource or the best outcome of our distorted thinking? So then the planning, however, starts to meet the preparation. Okay, now the preparation, the third step, okay, we plan it this way. Maybe if I'm going to do an assault and sit outside the bank and wait till late in the evening and jump some elderly person who's come out and extort from them. Or maybe I will make that phone call that says, if you don't pay me from the IRS, we'll come take your house. That's the same thing. Okay. So they set and they plan that process. How can I've planned it now, how do I actually enact it? What tools will I need? Where will be my target list, my target victims? Donald Harvey would pick out patients who could not communicate. Patients who had been there for a long, long time were languishing because then they couldn't tell anybody what was going on. Okay, and so he would pick them. And he also planned times a day. He also began to cover up his acts with actually when he was feeding patients or taking care of patients in hospitals. So that's that preparation of it. Here's the plan, but when plan meets reality, things begin to change. Now, when they move from there, the event horizon is the fourth piece, and then the event. Now, the event horizon is that time before. This is the turning point where the person can decide to do it or not do it. We see in many cases, we're looking at school shooters, looking at workplace violence shooters, looking at arsonists, etc., that there was that pivotal moment when they decide to go for it, if you will. And what is that threshold? Now, in some of these interviews and debriefings, these people, for example, they get to the point and say, Okay, today's the day I'm going to do it. But something comes along and it doesn't feel right. In one of our prison interviews, I was talking to a woman who was a kleptomaniac. And she had this, the whole thing, how she was going to steal and everything from stores, the jewelry, the perfume, the clothing. And she said, some days it's just not right. Some days you can tell it's not going to work. She said, but there are good days when you're in that store and you've got the jewelry in your pocket, you've got the high dollar perfume that you slipped away, you've got clothing on your arm that you're going to steal. And the clerk comes up and says, when you're ready to pay, I'm over here, I'll be glad to help you. And he goes, and she said, I would say to him, no, that's right, I'm still shopping. She said, knowing that I was going to walk out with all that stuff. She said, that was a good day. So the environment has to be just right to pick the right time, pick the right victims, all through that pattern, the distorted thinking, the planning, prepping to find that location, and then do we actually cross that threshold and make from fantasy into reality? Now, where we come in as investigators is the event. That's what we see at the end. Here's what we have. So what you do when you're building a reliable statement, you're filling those slots. Now, take it from the bottom, from the event, and work upward in your interview. Those details should be coming from the subject. Now, let me give you another example of how this worked for me 40 years ago. In a case, there was a serial rapist that had been caught in Louisiana. Victim had tried to escape. Authorities asked me to come in and interview the guy and see if there was more rapes and if we could track down what this guy was doing. They thought there had been more, because of that planning process, right? Unbeknownst to me, and I was digging into the relationship with women, and I stumbled across a case I didn't have any facts about, never knew about. And the guy gave up a 16-year-old triple homicide, and where he put the bodies, how he killed the 3 victims, what he used for the device, which led to more and more. So I'm interviewing with no facts, so I had no way to have confirmation bias. The only way to get the detail is he had to give it to me. And once I saw that pattern, I began working in reverse. And eventually, the guy was executed for murders that he committed in 3 states. By that time, you could only execute a guy once. But over 16 years, he'd been killing. I had no idea walking in what was going to happen. And using that cycle, distorted thinking, planning, the preparation, the event horizon, and the event. Just conduct your interview from the event, working backwards, where the weapon came from, how they gained access, how he picked victims, what he talked to victims, what she said to the children, or in the daycare, for example, I was doing some work in where they were, daycare operators were using heroin, and they wanted some quiet time when they could enjoy themselves. And they were giving the kids NyQuil so they would have long naps, and the whole daycare was being given NyQuil to the kids to sleep while they did their heroin. See the movement? From the end event, how do we get to that point? So take a look at that series, see how it fits in your case. Now, again, it works the best when somebody has a repetitive pattern, but that single first event will still be fulfilled watching that planning, the distorted thinking, planning, preparation, event horizon, event. Be sure to hit subscribe, the subscribe button, so you get notifications of their episodes coming up. Another one's a little bit longer one here. This one's about a 10-minute one going on, but this is a key piece to what I have used for 40 years, and it has worked effectively for me in recovering information. More cases and more studies like this are coming up. So hit the subscribe button. Look forward to seeing you in episode number 44. In the meantime, take care of each other, be safe, and remember the choices you make in the interview room eventually are going to show up in the courtroom. Can you show the reliability? See you again soon.